Photographers have a long fascination with the street. There's an energy that comes from the enormous variety of human expression and activity that just asks to be captured, remembered, and celebrated. For street photography, you want a camera that's small, unobtrusive, and reliable. To capture those candid and decisive moments, you need to be fast and patient. You don't want to be fumbling with your settings. You need to be able to select your settings and have confidence that they're going to work, just like the pioneers of street photography. This is the Fuji X-E3, which matches those needs nicely. 24 megapixel APS-C sensor, interchangeable X-mount lenses. With battery and memory card, 337 grams. It's available in all black or with a silver top panel. Although the black version is less visible, I find the silver to look slightly friendlier. The camera is thin, and the grip is a little shallow for my hand. Fuji has an optional larger grip. But with a clean back panel, I'm not accidentally pressing any buttons. I used a wrist strap for a little added security. Paired with the Fujinon XF 23mm f2 lens, the field of view is equivalent to a 35mm lens on a 35mm film camera. You can shoot wild from the hip, knowing the lens is capturing the scene. The X-E3 has an electronic viewfinder and an LCD screen. Would be more useful if the screen tilted up and down. It is a touchscreen. Swipe right to access film simulations and choose acros or monochrome, and each has 3 color filters to manage contrast, darken skies, or enhance skin tones.
The viewfinder is off to the side, which keeps your nose off the screen and you have your other eye open so you can see what's happening outside of the frame. And the diopter for this camera adjusts enough so that I can shoot without wearing my glasses.
You'll probably want to use the sound setup menu to silence the autofocus beep. After pressing the menu button, you'll notice that there's no cursor navigation keypad, but there's a joystick. That's a revelation, as I find this simple, easy, and reliable. No accidental clicks on unwanted options. And of course there's touch. Although it can't be used to navigate the main menu, it does work for the Q menu. Liking this. Touch to focus and shoot, or use the icon top right to change to focus only, to select the focus area, or off. Touch function control is comprehensive, but distributed throughout the menu and could be better organized. Setup, button dial setting, last option, touch enables and disables the touchscreen, and selects the area of the LCD that's used to select focus while shooting with the viewfinder. The function setting controls the 4 swipe motions. Each can be used to activate a variety of functions. And in addition to the screen, on the AF menu, again last item, selects the touch mode, shoot, focus, select area, or off. Back to sound, the X-E3 has a mechanical shutter with a sound that can't be muted. But with the electronic shutter, you have your choice of 3 sounds. 1, 2, 3, and 4 levels, including silent. The other advantages of the electronic shutter: a higher shutter speed up to 1/32,000, but with an ISO limited to 12.8. By default, Fuji does not display the image you've just taken. If you do want to chimp, press play, or turn the screen setup image display to your preferred duration. Fuji used the term minimalist to describe the X-E3 at the launch presentation, so the control dial has been removed, and like other Fuji models, there's no PASM mode dial. Instead, there's A, auto positions, on the shutter speed dial and on the lens's aperture ring. With both on A, it's the equivalent of program mode, which includes program shift, just turn the back dial for other combinations. For aperture priority, select the aperture using the ring. This 23mm adjusts from f2 to f16. Or for shutter priority, use the dial to set the shutter speed. Shutter from 1/4000th to 1 second, and if the shutter dial doesn't seem granular enough, use the back dial for the 1/3 intermediate settings. There's a T setting that enables the back dial to control exposure from 1/4000 to 15 seconds, and B, available in manual mode, which keeps the shutter open as long as the shutter button is pressed. With both of those modes, use the EV dial for exposure compensation adjustments 3 up and 3 down, and note that turning the EV dial to C enables the front dial with a 5-stop range. And with both aperture and shutter set, it's manual control. Swipe down or go to the menu to set the ISO 200 to 12.8. Fuji also provides extended modes up to 51.2 and down to 100. Often, using a qualifier for an ISO speed recognizes that there will be a deficiency at that setting, and although 51.2 isn't as high as some, I find it quite free of noise and color artifact, even at 1:1 resolution. There are 3 auto ISO ranges. For each, set the base, the maximum, and the triggering shutter speed. I found that useful. While we're here, set the meter mode, photometry in the Fuji language, multi, center-weighted, spot, and average. As highlight is starting to appear as a meter option on other cameras, I'm missing it here. Back to the IQ menu, where I set the dynamic range adjustment to auto. This creates a wider range, particularly useful for black and white. And I like to be a little more hands-on with the ISO, so in Setup Button Dial setting, I've turned the ISO command dial on. Pressing the front dial now switches it from adjusting aperture, EV, and ISO. And now that I'm fully manual, the meter display screen left displays the current meter reading. And let's talk about the screen for a second. First, when you rotate the camera clockwise or counterclockwise, the display follows on the LCD and in the viewfinder. And now that you've seen this, you'll be aggravated at every camera that doesn't do this. And using screen setup, using display custom settings, the screen display is fully customizable so that you can choose exactly which items display on screen, from important ones like level and histogram to minor aggravations, icons for settings you never change that are just clutter. So nice not to have to switch displays to see the histogram or check the level. Now, everybody please copy this. Incidentally, because this lens has an aperture ring, the front dial's aperture setting mode doesn't have any effect. So I find that useful as a parking spot for the dial. Otherwise, in the absence of a lock position, I'm sometimes making accidental adjustments. There's no onboard flash, but there is a flash shoe along with an extensive menu to control an optional flash. Default image quality is JPEG Fine. RAW plus Fine is also available, and that enables me to retrieve the color later or make more extensive exposure adjustments in Lightroom. RAW file options are lossless compression or no compression. Now, how did I make it this far without mentioning video? 4K up to 30 frames, HD up to 60, and of course, the film simulations also apply to video. Minimalist means no mode dial to select video, no video-specific record button. Access video mode using the drive button. It's at the bottom of the list, so scroll up one. That turns the shutter button into video stop and start. And while I enjoy shooting black and white, I'm also very fond of Fuji's classic chrome setting, a more subtle color treatment. For an even softer image, I use the Q menu and turn down the highlights and shadows, reduce the color and the sharpness. These are all personal preference settings, and if you can create a look that suits you in camera, that's much easier than doing color grading in post. I should mention the full auto switch, SR, scene recognition auto. I'd use it, but it's very limited. You can't save RAW, the film simulations are reduced to 3, and so many menu options are grayed out and unavailable. If you are going to use it, in addition to auto scene recognition, there are a variety of scene selections to optimize settings for various picture types here. I'm not going to discourage you from using them. I just recommend you set the dials to A instead. For continuous shooting in burst mode, you'll find 3, 4, 5, and 8 using the mechanical shutter. Shooting at 8 frames with manual settings and fine JPEGs, the screen display overlay disappears, but there's no flicker. I ran the X-E3 for a minute without running into the buffer. It would probably go on longer. And it takes precisely 8 frames per second without wavering, a total of 480 shots in 60 seconds. Then I switched to the electronic shutter with sound effect 1, and that unlocks 2 higher speeds. It does save about 14 frames for the first couple of seconds, then slows to about 8 per. In 60 seconds, 479 frames. So good for a fast but short burst, otherwise might as well stick to the mechanical shutter. The drive mode also hosts the brackets. Exposure, and here you use the menu to customize. This is quite extensive with a nice display across the bottom to show you what you're setting. With continuous, press the shutter once to take all the images. And this is the only camera I know where you can take 9 images with a 3-stop range, but beware, the first shot can take a few seconds and then the rest will fire. ISO 1/3 to a full stop, single exposure takes all 3. Film simulation, select which 3 using the menu, and again, a single exposure saves 3 files. There's a white balance bracket as well as dynamic range. And this is also where panorama is found. It works nicely, select the angle or overall width and the direction. Then slowly sweep across the scene. The indicator on the bottom shows your progress. When you're done, the camera stitches the images into one. You can view the whole image or press play to pan across it. Although it's taken Fuji some time to catch up, this feature is now one of the best implementations. And multi-exposure. Take one image. If it's okay, position the second, I like that overlay, and take it. The intervalometer isn't on the drive mode, and it's for stills, not time-lapse video. Of course, I wouldn't let that stop me. And Fuji continues to fine-tune their focus mode, which now works very nicely. Switch on the front to select single, continuous, and manual. Menu selects the area, single point, which can be sized. Press the joystick and turn the rear dial, 6 sizes. This is the 91-point grid, or select 325 points. The hybrid focus uses phase detect for the larger central points, contrast on the sides. Or switch the AF mode to zone, which provides a larger and movable area. It's available in 3 sizes. There's also wide tracking, which covers the screen with dynamic points, usually selecting the closest object. I found this the slowest with more hunting than I'd expect, particularly when used in combination with the continuous focus mode. I found it much easier to use the screen with the touch focus. Scroll to the second page of AF/MF options for face detect. The options here include face only, face and either eye, or priority for a specific eye. Again, I did not find this to be as reliable as I'd like. If you're using spot metering, focus and exposure spot can be interlocked, useful for bright objects in dark scenes or vice versa. Fuji supports manual focus better than most. The blue bar on the distance ruler shows the depth of field. Press the rear dial once for the standard expanded view focus assist, turn for 2 zoom levels. Hold it down to switch to digital split image where you line up vertical lines, and hold again for focus peaking assist. In manual focus, the shutter is wide open for a very narrow depth of field. Press the shutter softly to preview the actual depth of field. If you're a back focus shooter, use the button dial setting to disable shutter autofocus, and then use the function setting for the AEL button, or whichever you prefer, to enable AF on. There are fewer focus options in video mode. I recommend that unless you're using manual focus, you set the movie AF mode to area, which enables you to select. There's only one focus area selection, and although the focus point can be selected, it can't be sized. Photometry is not available in video mode, and face detect is not available in 4K video mode. It is available in HD, but not with eye. Touch does work for a usable rack focus. For manual focus, focus peak highlight is available. And there's no zebra, but if you turn the screen highlight option on, it will flash over exposed areas. It's nice to have a mic input, but it's the micro size, so you'll need Fuji's proprietary mic or an adapter. Sadly, no headphone out. There is an audio level adjustment. With meters, only 4 steps, so not much granularity. There's no on-screen meter available while recording. There is a substantial crop going from stills to 4K video, which is in the 16:9 UHD format. When you're shooting in HD formats, no crop. 4K requires a U3 type SD card or faster. Recordings are limited to 10 minutes and saved in 4 GB chunks. HD is limited to 15. Total time available on the card displays at the top of the screen before you start recording. Afterwards, there's an on-screen countdown. Video is recorded in .mov files. 4K 30 data rate is about 100 megabits. All of the film simulations are available for video, but not the advanced filters. The X-E3 is quite sophisticated when it comes to video. There's a live HDMI out using the micro connector. And in movie mode, the output resolution and frame rate is controlled by the movie mode selection. In stills modes, the HDMI output is 1080/60. Menu overlay can be on for a monitor or off for an external recorder. If you're looking for a flat profile, this is standard with the 4 image adjustments at 0. Watch the histogram. Then switch to Chrome and bring the adjustments to their minimum. That's my usual setting. Compared to standard on the left, you'll see that there's slightly more room at the bottom and the top of the histogram. You can select to record to the SD card or to an external recorder on the HDMI. But although this is a feature on other Fuji models, there's no F-log here. Much more than most, Fuji releases updated firmware that really increases a camera's feature set. If they maintain that tradition with the X-E3, who knows? I've just about left it to the end, but nearly the first thing the X-E3 wants to do is pair with your smartphone using Bluetooth. Using the free Fuji Camera Remote app, the new pairing registration makes it simpler than ever to connect, and after pairing, it uses the smartphone to set the time. The app provides geotagging and remote control, and then it transfers photos to the phone automatically. At the top of the screen, you'll see the Bluetooth connection icon and the number of photos that are being transferred. Now, maybe because I'm getting used to it, but I find the Fuji menu to be reasonably well organized, things are where I expect to find them. However, the cursor skips over the dimmed out options, with no explanation or ability to see what I might have to change to get access. Now, adding to this frustration, the manual doesn't detail any of the exclusions for the various modes or settings. There's a My Menu feature, which has to be initiated from the user menu. It's useful but not comprehensive enough. For example, why can't Format be My Menued? And once you've configured it, pressing the menu button skips to the My Menu page. Could there be an option to return to the last menu item? Among my complaints, the tripod socket isn't centered and is much too close to the battery card door, so when you're using a tripod, you not only have to remove the camera from the tripod, it's also necessary to remove the quick release plate. And this is such a pretty camera, so nicely designed. How did the team overlook this? The X-E3 can be charged with USB, but not powered.
Fuji does like to step out on their own, this time by removing the mode dial and the control pad from the back of the camera and adding a screen display that turns. And while that does make the X-E3 kind of idiosyncratic and quirky, it is a photographer-centric approach that works for travel and street photography. Thanks so much for watching. Comments and questions below, and please consider subscribing.